The morning it happened, Celeste had been folding laundry. That detail never left her. The way she had been standing in the bedroom she had shared with Rowan for 11 years, pressing the crease into one of his dress shirts with her palm, when she heard the front door open and voices fill the hallway below. She set the shirt down. She counted the voices. There were 3, Rowan's, his mother Vera's, and someone else she recognized but had hoped never to hear in this house again. She walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. Celeste Harding, 37-year-old wife of Rowan Harding and silent majority shareholder of Dunmore Capital Group, stood at the top of the stairs in bare feet and jeans, holding a half-folded dress shirt, while her mother-in-law pointed at her and said, "She needs to pack her things and be gone by this evening." Rowan didn't look up. That was the part people never quite understood when she told it later. Not the words. Not even Vera's voice, which carried the particular sharpness of a woman who had spent 64 years believing her convenience was everyone else's obligation. What broke something open inside Celeste in that moment was that Rowan, her husband, the man she had driven to the emergency room at 2 in the morning when he thought he was having a heart attack, the man whose career she had quietly funded through 3 failed business ventures before Dunmore made everything else irrelevant. Rowan did not look up. He was looking at his phone. Vera crossed the foyer and started up the stairs. She was wearing the cream blazer she always wore when she meant to make an impression. Vera Harding, 64 years old, widow of the late Edmund Harding, and a woman who had never in her adult life entered a room without calculating exactly how much space she was entitled to occupy. She moved up the stairs with the purposeful stride of someone delivering an eviction notice. "I've spoken with Rowan," she said, stopping 4 steps below Celeste. "This isn't working. You know it isn't working. The decent thing would be to spare everyone the prolonged unpleasantness." Celeste looked past her at Rowan. He was still looking at his phone. "Rowan," she said. He glanced up. Something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly, more like discomfort, the expression of a man who had stepped into a situation that had grown slightly larger than he intended and was now hoping it would resolve itself without requiring him to do anything difficult. "We've talked about this," he said. "You know we've talked about this." The third voice came from the hallway below. Tatum stepped out of the living room archway, holding a glass of water like she owned the house. She was 29 years old, the daughter of one of Rowan's golf contacts, and had been working as a consultant for one of his subsidiary firms for 14 months. Celeste had known about her for 8 of those months. She had said nothing because she had been waiting, not for the right moment, but for Rowan to choose correctly on his own. She had believed, in the way that people believe things they know better than to believe, that he would. "This is uncomfortable for everyone," Tatum said, with the gentle authority of someone who had rehearsed the line. "It really would be better if you—" "I didn't ask you," Celeste said. It was quiet enough that the sound of traffic 2 blocks away became briefly audible. Vera recovered first. She stepped up one more stair and said, in the tone she used for housekeepers and hotel front desk clerks, "Your things can go in boxes. Rowan can arrange storage." Celeste looked at the dress shirt in her hands. She set it on the step beside her, with the same careful attention she had given everything in this house for 11 years. And then she went into the bedroom and closed the door. She did not pack. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. She had met Rowan Harding at a fundraiser in Chicago 14 years ago, when she was 23 years old and 3 years into building the investment structure that would eventually become Dunmore Capital Group. She had not told him about it on their first date, or their 5th, or at their wedding. She had not told him because she had grown up watching people treat her mother differently once they understood the family had money. And she had made a private decision in her early 20s that she wanted to be known first. She wanted someone to choose her when she was just Celeste, before the accounts, before the portfolio, before the board. Rowan had been charming. He was good at charming. He had a way of making a room feel warmer when he entered it, and a way of making you feel, for the duration of a conversation, that you were the most interesting person he had ever spoken to. She had loved him for it. She had trusted him for it. She had also, in the years since, quietly arranged for Dunmore's real estate arm to hold the mortgage on the building that housed Harding Collective, Rowan's consultancy firm, the one that finally turned a profit after Celeste redirected 2 institutional clients his way without telling him where the referrals came from. She had never touched those arrangements. They sat in her portfolio the way a lot of things sat in her life. Present, patient, unacknowledged. She heard footsteps on the stairs. The bedroom door opened. Rowan came in and stood near the window. "I think it would be better," he said, "if you stayed somewhere else for a while. While we sort things out, she repeated. "This doesn't have to be." "Rowan," she turned to look at him. "Is this what you want?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause, 4 or 5 seconds long, told her everything she needed to know. A man who was unsure would have said no immediately. The pause meant he was calculating. "I think things between us have been difficult for a long time," he said. "I think we both know that. That's not an answer. Celeste, is this what you want?" He looked out the window. "I think it's what's best," he said finally, "for both of us." She stood up. She walked to the closet and she pulled out the overnight bag she used for work trips. She packed 3 days of clothes. She packed her laptop. She picked up the portfolio on the nightstand. Not the decorative one she kept for appearances. The real one. The one she actually worked from. And she put it in the outer pocket of the bag. She walked past Rowan without speaking. On her way through the living room, she passed Tatum, who had settled into the armchair by the fireplace. The armchair Celeste had picked out at an estate sale in Evanston 6 years ago, had reupholstered in a grey linen she'd spent 3 weekends sourcing, and had carried up the front steps herself because the delivery window had passed. She didn't stop. Outside, she sat in her car in the driveway for approximately 90 seconds. Then she drove to the Whitmore Hotel on Michigan Avenue, which Dunmore Capital Group had acquired as part of a portfolio restructuring 18 months prior, where the general manager upgraded her to the corner suite on the 14th floor without being asked. She ordered room service and opened her laptop. The next morning, she called her attorney. Not a divorce attorney, not yet. She called Nora Cassell, the woman who had been Dunmore's chief legal counsel for 9 years and who knew the full architecture of everything Celeste had built. She explained the situation. Nora listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Celeste had always valued about her. "Do you want to move on anything?" Nora asked when she was finished. "Not yet," Celeste said. "Just make sure the documentation is current." "It's always current. I know. I just want to hear you say it." Nora said it. Celeste hung up and poured a second cup of coffee and looked out at the lake. What came next happened in the particular way that consequences tend to happen, not all at once, but in a sequence, each piece arriving before the previous one had fully landed. 3 weeks after Celeste left the house, Rowan's firm received a letter from the property management company that held the lease on their office space on the 31st floor of a building in the Loop. The letter was not alarming on its face. It was a routine notification of a change in portfolio ownership, the kind of letter that commercial tenants received periodically and typically filed without reading closely. The property management company was a subsidiary of a holding entity that had recently been restructured. The holding entity was a subsidiary of Dunmore Capital Group. Rowan didn't make the connection. His office manager, a careful young man named Elliot who had been with the firm for 4 years, flagged it and brought it to Rowan's attention. Rowan read it twice and then called the property management company's general line. He was told that any lease renegotiations would need to go through the parent entity. He was given a contact number. He called the contact number. He was connected after a brief hold to the offices of Dunmore Capital Group. He didn't know what Dunmore Capital Group was. He knew the name. It had appeared in business conversations over the years, the kind of institutional entity that professionals in Chicago encountered at a distance through press mentions and conference programs. He had no reason to associate it with his wife. He asked for the name of the ownership principal. The receptionist told him she wasn't authorized to share that information and offered to transfer him to their investor relations department. He said he would call back. He mentioned it to Vera that evening at dinner, which by then had become a nightly occurrence. Tatum was there. Vera listened with the focused attention of someone encountering a problem that might, if properly managed, remain someone else's. "Just renegotiate," Vera said. "Buildings change hands. It's routine. The parent company is enormous," Rowan said. "I looked them up. They hold about 40 properties in the metro area alone. Then they're not paying attention to one small lease. You have nothing to worry about." Rowan nodded. He trusted his mother's certainty the way he had always trusted it. Not because it was usually correct, but because it had always been confident, and he had long ago confused those two things. The second piece arrived the following week. Rowan's firm had 2 clients that together represented about 60% of its consulting revenue. Both were institutional, one a mid-sized pension fund administrator, one a regional infrastructure firm. Both had been referred to Harding Collective 3 years ago through what Rowan had understood to be a personal connection cultivated at an industry conference. He had never looked too carefully at where the introductions had originated, because looking too carefully at good luck was something he had always considered unnecessarily risky. Both clients notified him in the same week that they were reviewing their consulting arrangements. Not terminating, reviewing. The letters were polite and formally non-committal, the kind of language that meant nothing on its surface and everything beneath it. Rowan called his contact at the pension fund administrator, a man he had dinner with twice a year. The man was pleasant and vague. He mentioned that there had been some internal restructuring. He mentioned that certain relationships were being evaluated. He said he was sure it would all be fine. That evening, Rowan sat at the kitchen table for a long time after Tatum had gone to sleep. He was not a stupid man. He had simply, over the course of their marriage, made the specific choice not to be curious about his wife. He had been incurious in the small ways, not asking about her day, not reading the documents she occasionally left on the kitchen table, not registering that she took calls behind closed doors, not because she was hiding something from him, but because she was running something of consequence. He had been incurious in the large ways too. The house that he believed he had bought on a 30-year mortgage, whose monthly payment had not changed even when interest rates climbed and his firm's revenue fluctuated. The car he drove, leased at a rate that never quite made sense on paper, but that he had never examined. The investment accounts in his name that performed with a consistency that real markets did not typically produce. He had not asked because the answers were comfortable, and asking risked making them less so. Now he sat at the kitchen table and felt the particular nausea of a man who has in one sitting begun to understand the architecture of his own life. He called Celeste. She answered on the third ring. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Okay. In person." She was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow," she said. "Noon. The coffee place on Wacker." She was already there when he arrived, at a corner table with a coffee she had clearly been nursing for a while, and the portfolio she always carried. She looked. He registered this with a confusion he could not fully name. Entirely fine. Not performing fineness. Not managing herself. Just fine. He sat down. He ordered nothing. He told her about the lease notification, the property management company, the name Dunmore Capital Group. He watched her face while he said it. She listened without expression. "The contact number connected to Dunmore," he said. "I looked them up. They're enormous. 40 properties in Chicago alone, nationally there." He stopped. He looked at her. "It's yours," he said. Not a question. She set her coffee cup down. "Yes." He sat with that for a moment. "The clients. The referrals came from relationships I had. I arranged them because your firm needed stable revenue and I wanted the firm to succeed. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel." She stopped. "I didn't tell you the house. The mortgage is held by a subsidiary. The structure made sense at the time. The car Rowan, the accounts Rowan." Her voice was not unkind. It was precise. "I know what you're doing. You're cataloging. You're trying to find the edge of it. There isn't one. It's all connected. It's all mine. I built it before you, and I have been building it throughout, and it will be thereafter. That is the answer to all of the questions." He stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked out the window for a moment. There were people moving past on the sidewalk, ordinary Thursday noon people with coffee and phones and places to be. She watched them for a few seconds before she answered. "Because I wanted to be chosen first," she said. "That's all. I wanted one person in my life who knew me before all of that, and I thought." She stopped again. She pressed her lips together briefly. "I thought you were that person." The past tense sat between them. "Celeste, you let your mother tell me to pack my things," she said. "You were standing 8 feet away and you looked at your phone." He opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. "Please don't explain that one." He didn't. He drove home that afternoon and he told Vera everything. He was not sure what he was hoping she'd say. Perhaps something useful. Perhaps something that would make the architecture feel less like a ceiling coming down. Vera listened. Then she said, "This can be managed. What matters is that you're the husband. You have standing." "Standing," he repeated. "Legally. You've been married 11 years. That counts for something." "Mother, call Jeffrey." Jeffrey was the family's attorney who had handled Edmund Harding's estate and a handful of other arrangements over the years. "Tell him the situation. There are frameworks for this." Rowan called Jeffrey. Jeffrey listened to the summary and then said, very carefully, that community property considerations would depend on the specific structure of the assets, that assets held in trusts or entities prior to and during a marriage were subject to complex determinations, and that he would need to review documentation before offering any opinion. He asked whether Rowan had any documentation related to Dunmore Capital Group or its subsidiaries. Rowan did not. Jeffrey said he would need to do some research and would follow up. He followed up 4 days later. His tone on the phone was different, measured in the way that professional voices become measured when they are delivering information they would prefer not to deliver. "The structures are very clean," Jeffrey said. "Whoever set this up did it correctly. Most of the significant assets are held in entities that would be very difficult to reach. Most," Rowan said, "the marital home would be subject to normal proceedings. But," a pause, "given the mortgage structure there are some complexities there as well." Rowan was quiet. Rowan, Jeffrey said, I want to be straightforward with you. Your wife has very good legal counsel. Whatever position you're considering, they have almost certainly anticipated it. The divorce filing came through Nora's office 7 days later. It was thorough and precise, the way things tended to be when the person filing had spent 14 years building precise things. Celeste did not make claims she wasn't entitled to. She did not reach for anything punitive. She simply drew clean lines around what was hers and held them without apology. The house proceedings were brief. The mortgage structure meant that Celeste held effective control of the asset. Rowan received a fair settlement for the equity portion attributable to marital contributions, which was less than he had expected and more than Jeffrey had privately feared, because Celeste had instructed Nora not to minimize it. She had not done it for him. She had done it because it was correct, and she had spent her entire adult life doing things because they were correct, and she saw no reason to change that on his account. Harding Collective lost the 2 institutional clients. The lease on the 31st floor was renewed, but at market rate, which was 31% higher than the rate Rowan had been paying. These were business decisions made through normal channels by people doing their jobs. Celeste did not make any calls. She did not send any instructions. She simply stopped making different calls and different instructions, and the market filled the space her previous arrangements had occupied. It was not revenge. It was just the world operating as it actually operated, without the adjustments she had quietly been making for 11 years. Vera Harding said, at a family dinner approximately 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, that Celeste had clearly planned the whole thing from the beginning, that she had trapped Rowan deliberately, that she had hidden her wealth as a manipulation. She said this with complete conviction, and Rowan nodded along, not because he believed it, but because it was easier than the alternative. The alternative was that Celeste had done everything right, that she had loved him genuinely and hidden her wealth, not as a trap, but as a hope that he would be the person who chose her when she was only herself, without the portfolio and the properties and the 40 buildings in the Chicago metro area and the institutional reach that came with carrying her particular name into a room, that she had maintained that hope through failed ventures and a difficult mother-in-law and 8 months of knowing about Tatum, and still she had folded his shirts, still she had kept his referrals alive, still she had sat across from him at dinner and listened to him talk about his day and waited. The alternative was that she had given him a last chance without telling him it was a last chance. The morning he stood in the foyer with his phone and let his mother point at his wife and say she needed to be gone by evening. And he had looked at his phone. The consulting work did not collapse immediately. Rowan was skilled enough to rebuild a partial client base, and he did. He was not ruined in any dramatic sense. He was simply no longer insulated. He experienced for the first time in his adult life what it was like to operate in a market that had no quiet hand making adjustments on his behalf. It was harder than he had expected. It turned out that a great many things were. Tatum left in the spring, she said, and she was not wrong, that he had become very difficult to be around. He had developed the particular bitterness of a man who had lost something he had never fully acknowledged having. And it made him poor company. She had not signed up for poor company. She was 29 and had other options. She took them. Vera maintained until a conversation 18 months later at a family event that everything that had happened was Celeste's fault. At the family event there was an open bar, and Rowan had been at it long enough that when Vera said it again, that Celeste had planned it, that Celeste had manipulated, he turned and looked at his mother and said, "She folded my shirts the morning you told her to leave." Vera looked at him. "She was folding my shirts," he said. "She was standing in the bedroom folding my shirts, and you came into the house and told her to be gone by evening, and I stood there and I looked at my phone." He didn't say anything else. He got another drink, but he didn't take it back. Celeste heard about that exchange secondhand, through a mutual contact, about 3 months after it happened. She was sitting in her office on the 22nd floor of a building on Michigan Avenue, one of 7 buildings on Michigan Avenue in Dunmore's portfolio, when the contact mentioned it, the way people mention things they think you might find satisfying. She was quiet for a moment. "Good," she said. Not warmly, not triumphantly, just accurately. She went back to work. She had a meeting at 3, a call with their London partners at 4:30, and a dinner that evening with the woman who was about to become Dunmore's new board chair. There was a lot to do. There had always been a lot to do. She had simply for 11 years done some of it quietly and the rest of it in plain sight, and only one of those 2 things had ever been properly seen. She was done being quiet. The office was on the 22nd floor, and through the window, on clear days, you could see the lake all the way to the horizon. Flat and grey and enormous, indifferent to everything that happened on its shores. Celeste had chosen this office specifically for that view, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because she found it useful, in the way that large and indifferent things can be useful, to be reminded periodically that the world did not actually require anyone to make it smaller in order to be loved in it. She had learned that lesson later than she should have. She did not intend to forget it.